But too many members, I think, are not confident enough to feel strongly enough to always stick to the Constitution. But the great event that occurred this year is the fact that so many young people love this idea. They love the idea of the Constitution. And I think that's what's great about that spelling of the word Constitution. It is meant to be, we love liberty, we love our Constitution, we love America, in contrast to how they would like to paint us. You know, if you're a free market economist and you believe in markets, you lack compassion, you don't care about your fellow man, which is ridiculous. You know, if you care about your fellow man, you have to believe in freedom and property rights and contract rights. You have to believe in sound money. And that's one thing that I have pushed and talk about all the time. One of the main motivating factors when I ran in the 1970s was to talk about the monetary issue. And that has been one of the great outcomes of the campaign, is the campuses now are really excited about talking about the Federal Reserve System and monetary policy and how it's connected to big government. And a debate or a discussion on monetary policy in a presidential campaign probably hasn't gone on for over 100 years. And so I find this very, very encouraging, and people are starting to buy books dealing with the Federal Reserve and looking into this matter. So that to me has been very, very encouraging. And also just the fact that so many young people would get looking at what I was doing after they maybe heard me on a debate or something. We go to the website and say, I agree with these other issues too. And then they would look at a voting record and say, he actually voted that way. That sort of is the real shocker, He actually voted that way, even if he had to vote by himself. Yeah, almost 300 times in the last 10 years, but I think that instead of being a liability, it becomes an asset. That's pretty amazing, What members of Congress thinks would be a liability. And one thing that comes up frequently on the House floor is I think they heard we raised a couple dollars during the campaign and that we have a couple names on our list. And they'll come and they'll very seriously sit down and say, you know what, we'd like you to come in and give us a little talk on how you raise money on the internet, like it's a technique. And you go out and you rent lists and you do this and you learn tricks, and it had nothing to do with that. I mean, the people heard the message, they organized the meetup groups, they joined us, they ran the campaign, and they raised the money. So, but the whole point was the message, the issue, the problems that we face and the answers that we give. And this is why we come out so often with a lot of optimism. And I'm always so pleased and somewhat surprised that at the end of our rallies and the people I talk to are energized with optimism. And I said, well, yeah, but I just talk about all the problems. Yeah, but they say you have to face your problems first. You have to understand your problems before you can be hopeful. You need a diagnosis before you can have the right treatment. And but I am optimistic in the sense that if you do analyze what's happening, and we know what our problems are, and you do the correct analysis and you offer solutions, why shouldn't we be optimistic? And I always make the point, I make it in the book, and that is that we're better off than so many other countries. We're better off than, say, the Soviet system. They didn't have our same traditions. We have pretty good traditions. Lousy current events, a government that's out of control, but at least we remember a time when we had sound money. We respected the Fourth Amendment. We used to know about a non-interventionist foreign policy, even in the Republican Party, as well as the founders, talked about it and gave us strong advice. So it's not like it's totally strange. The other thing, other than monetary issue, which I was very delighted about, but even on the foreign policy, it was first thought, and that's why I really appreciate what your group is doing, because so often over the years, especially starting with the 60s in Vietnam, that if you opposed Vietnam, you were a left-winger. You had to be an ally of Jane Fonda, and Jane Fonda was an ally with the North Vietnamese communists. And therefore, you couldn't possibly be pro-American, pro-peace, pro-Constitution by taking a position of, why are we fighting wars that are undeclared? First, as a rejection of the Constitution and the war powers belonging into the hands of the Congress, but it also means that we get ourselves involved in things we shouldn't be involved in. And so there's every reason in the world to believe that I think we've made some progress in saying that you can be a conservative, you can be patriotic, and you can be favorable toward the troops and still take this policy. The best concrete evidence we have for this is what happened with the donations coming from the active military personnel. And there was another summary this week. I think they totalized the whole year. In the last quarter, obviously, was the case. But in one quarter, we got more money from active military personnel than everybody else put together, Republicans and Democrats. And I don't know whether that's the case for the whole year, but I know we're far ahead of everybody else in receiving individual donations, and they did not calculate the donations under $200 because you don't report those. So there may be a lot of troops sent less than $200 that we received that would have boosted that. So that to me was a real encouraging event, and I met a lot of people that were involved in the military, either active duty personnel or people who just left or family members. Of course, I have a picture hanging in my apartment up here, and it's a pretty casual picture. If you look at it, you wouldn't know what's going on, but it's just a young woman. And I sort of have my hand on her shoulder, and it just looks like I'm talking to her and listening to her. And here, she had lost her son, over in Vietnam, over in Iraq. And they asked me before we had a rally, this was out in California, would you say hello to her because she wanted to meet you because she just really likes what you're doing. So that to me was very encouraging. At the same time, so much of the propaganda that you hear on the television is, war and patriotism, and you can't buck the war. And of course, that to me is one of the greatest threats, is what happens when a country gets so embedded and a government gets so embedded with the special interest groups. And that's where we are today. So we've talked about a military-industrial complex for many years, since the 50s. But now we have many more complexes, medical. There's a medical complex out there. So drug companies and insurance companies run the medical profession. And now what happens, the opposition tell us that medicine's in bad shape. Now we need socialized medicine. And they're running full tilt on that. Then you have people in the media also sell weapons. And how much resistance from the major media was there for going to war? I mean, just think how much propaganda there was. How much chance did we get to argue our case? And the only time our side was shown, it was that we were unpatriotic and not supporting the troops. I don't know how many times we were forced to have votes on the House floor. It was, support the troops, support the troops, support the troops. But then at the conclusion was the re-endorsement enthusiastically of the policy. And of course, I wouldn't vote for that, and sometimes it was with only a very small number. But it's all the propaganda that goes on. But this is to be expected, that once power gravitates to Washington, all these groups will, firm up. You have the medical profession now. They come here all the time, but they're only looking for higher fees. They're not looking for private market care. You have a few farmers now and then come, perpetuating something that's been around for a long time. So if you're an individual and all you want is to be left alone, and you want your liberty, and you want the government to do the things they're supposed to do and they don't do, such as give us a sound currency and protect property rights. No, we have a government now that through eminent domain is always throwing people off their land and making use of it. Do they enforce contracts? No. They come in and violate the contracts. They've done that in the monetary issue, and they're doing it in housing issues right now. Oh, yeah, he defaulted, and you have title to his house. Oh, no, we can't do that. We'll rewrite those laws. So the government interferes with contracts. They